I'd like to call to order the October 2nd meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. Mrs. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Council agency members Steve Glickman.
Here.
Barbara Spector.
Here.
Joe Przezinski.
Here.
Mike Wasserman.
Here.
And Mayor Chair Diane McNutt.
Here. At every council meeting, we have a future leader of our community who helps us do the Pledge of Allegiance. And these are young people who have already started to show leadership ability in their school or in community organizations. And this evening we have Michael Guglielmo, who is a 5th grader at Alta Vista Elementary School. So I'm going to have him come up, and if the rest of us would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready to salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Michael, thank you very much. Applause, please, for a fine job that he did. Here's a little gift for you, a memento of your evening here. Thank you. Mr. Korb, do we have a closed session report?
We do. Council did meet in closed session tonight to complete an employee evaluation of yours truly. I understand the evaluation is complete. No final reportable actions were taken. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Council, would you please join me down at the ceremonial podium for a very special commendation this evening? This evening we have one of the very special ladies of Los Gatos is going to be leaving us as an employee, but not as a resident of the town. So we want to ask Marlene Rasmussen to please come forward so that we can honor her. No crying at council meetings.
Oh, I cried at many.
Well, sometimes I do too, but we don't talk about that. Okay, so let me read the commendation here. Whereas Marlene Rasmussen served the town of Los Gatos as an employee of the clerk department since 1986 and elected town council member from 1980 to 1983. And whereas during this time she unselfishly contributed her confidence, abilities, and public service skills to the community, the town council, the clerk department, and the entire town staff. And whereas, as clerk administrator since 2004, Marlene provided valuable support to the town council and mentoring to the employees of the clerk department and equipping them with the tools to succeed. And whereas Marlene's community service to the Kiwanis, the Girl Scouts of America, and the Community Foundation have contributed to the town's quality of life. And whereas Marlene is retiring from her position of clerk administrator and will be enjoying her family, travels, and continued community service, now therefore the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to Marlene Rasmussen for years of dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and its residents. Applause, please. Before I let her speak, I have to tell you that we had to edit and edit and edit to get that crunched down so that it would fit here on the commendation, because otherwise it would be a multiple-page document. So we're going to be hearing more about her at her retirement celebration on Thursday. But right now, let's see if she has some words to say.
Hopefully I do have a few words to say without tears, but this has been a truly wonderful life since I settled with my family in Los Gatos in 1962. I was told at that time that whatever I gave to Los Gatos would give back to me tenfold, and it certainly has. Serving on the town council in the early 80s opened my eyes to local government and this incredible community. It has been a truly wonderful experience to work with Los Gatos and for Los Gatos. We have all been very fortunate to have hardworking, dedicated council members, all of them over the years. The most caring, dedicated, professional staff any municipality could ever wish for. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. And I will be watching as you keep the charm and beauty of Los Gatos over the next 100 years. And I will be back to join you at one time, Rod. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't worry, she's getting to you. Marlene, don't forget. I was going to say. Okay, Marlon finished making the rounds in the audience? Okay. Next on the agenda, we have consent items. These are items that will be approved with one motion unless there's a member of council or member of the public who would like to pull off the consent. It will be added then under other business. Anyone on council? Anyone in the public who wishes to pull an item off of consent? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
Move adoption of the consent items.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Verbal communication. This is your opportunity to speak to any item not on tonight's agenda. I have several cards. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a card. And we will begin with Millie Bernstein. So you just come right up here to the microphone. And you have up to 3 minutes to talk about your subject matter.
Yes, the reason I came tonight was there must be somebody in this town that talks to PG&E tree people before they massacre the trees. I unfortunately live next to a creek and inherited the trees along with the property. And so I've taken care of it, but PG&E comes every year, and this year they came unannounced, of course, to the backyard, and they've put a red thing around a tree that they plan to take down and leave the wood. And I was supposed to sign this paper, and I've never had that before with the wood left in my backyard. I don't choose to do that. But the red ribbon or whatever it is around the tree. The other trees, I've given all the approvals to all the rest of the trimming, although I must say that it used to be Davy's tree, and now it's somebody else, Esplanade or something, that trims the trees. But the people don't speak English, so you can't tell them that they're not in the easement or what have you, because they don't speak any English. So anyway, I don't want the wood from this tree, and I don't know if I should take off the ribbon or not take off the ribbon, or if anybody talks to PG&E tree people before. I think I was referred to Mr. Boyer, and he doesn't return calls. So when I did talk to him, he wasn't about to do anything. He says his job is to do PG&E tree people after they massacre your trees. You call him, but not before. So I was hoping somebody would come up with somebody that I can talk to about this tree. I'm not calling them. No way. So maybe somebody will come up with something here.
Okay. Mrs. Bernstein, I think staff, Mr. Curtis right over there is going to probably talk to you offline out in the hallway and answer your questions. Okay. Did you have something else to say? No. Citizen Ray?
Good evening. First off, I'd like to address Mr. Sleesman, okay? I'm sorry that I won't be able to speak to the issue of your name tonight. I don't have enough time, okay? But it will happen later. Be patient. Yes, I wanted to address you folks about an item of great concern for the community, in my opinion, and that is the Matco Monster Home up on Kennedy Road, known as the DeSantis Castle, okay? First off, I want you to know there's a timeline here, and it shows 6 secret meetings with the staff over a 2-year time, okay? Proof positive of what I am starting to say around this town, that the staff is acting as a real estate body more than a civic body, okay? They are doing private real estate deals behind closed doors, the public shut out, and to the opposition of the public interest, okay? So, going from that, there's a lot of, in my opinion, deceit and dishonesty in this application. Right off the bat, they show a picture of no view of the proposed monster home from the dome, the corner of Los Gatos Boulevard and Blossom Hill Road, okay, a viewing platform. Well, of course that doesn't show, because the story poles aren't up. It's mandatory for story poles to be up. Why aren't they up? I say the fix is on. The fix is on, okay? No viewing from the platform because there are no story poles. Give me a break. Now, I see the yellow is up here. I'll be here at the next meeting when this is before you. And I will be speaking in more detail of the, it's 11,000 square foot home, the 16,000 square foot overall with a basement and so forth. Dirt hall is about 24,000 square feet of cut, okay? It's about 1,200 tin-wheel dump trucks to be run off that property full of dirt through the center of Los Gatos.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Your time is up.
Are you thinking about it?
No. I'm
Oh.
getting ready to get our next person, which is Egon Jensen.
After you. Egon, I always defer to Egon, okay?
Madam Mayor, member of the council, Egon Jensen, 182 Lester Lane. After watching the public hearing on the last call, it was obvious that a large number of calls to the police department is generated from bars and restaurants in town. consider the high cost of providing law enforcement. I'm asking you to consider a policy whereby when a call is generated from such institution, they be giving a point. And after so many points have been accumulated, then they will be charged for the service. This way we can recover some of the cost and not the cost borne by the taxpayer. That's all I have to say. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, sir?
can I make a quick comment to Mr. Jensen's proposal? I find this interesting. I think we do something similar with alarm calls and false alarms, and I wonder if we could ask if the council would have an interest, at least, to put this on a future agenda, wherein we could get some commentary.
I'm sorry, but I could not hear that. Melody, would you tell me? My hearing is that bad.
He wants to put it on an agenda if, for a future council meeting, if he can have a second person agree.
Thanks very much.
I would agree with that, Madam.
Mr. Wasserman is requesting that also. So,
Madam Mayor?
yes, sir?
I would, if we are going to have that on the agenda, make sure that we leave enough time for our staff, especially the police department, to have adequate time to review that and comment to us.
Absolutely. I believe this is a conversation going on in some other cities, and so I know there's some work already out there somewhere.
Yes, and I would just comment to Mr. Glickman's response. I agree that I don't want to push this into any kind of mode wherein we've stressed our resources, but I really would like to see some kind of return on this relatively quickly, at least in a kind of a higher level overview.
Yes, we'll work with the mayor to bring it forward, and the first level could be somewhat of a scoping conversation.
Thank you. The last card I have is for Michael Burke. And while he's coming up, if there's anyone else who wishes to speak under verbal communication, please fill out a card and bring it up.
Thank you. I wanted to talk to you briefly about Spare the Air Days. We had, I think, 11 of them this summer. And I tried being a good citizen to stay out of my car, and I think I stayed out of my car all but 3 of those days. And 2 of those days were on weekends. The thing that was very discouraging, though, was almost 2 a day. I encountered people using gas-powered leaf blowers on Spare the Air Days. Now, I drive a LEV, a low-emission vehicle, certified, which produces a whole lot less junk in the air than a backpack leaf blower. And as VTA is saying, hey, we'll pay for your ride if you take VTA instead of all these things, we can't get the people who are using the leaf blowers, and most of them are not residents, they're contractors that come in, to not do this. And besides the pollution they're putting in there, they're telling people, if you got breathing problems, stay in. So what do? The people were in the parking lots between University and North Santa Cruz, they're kicking dust up in the air, making it even harder for people to breathe. To me, we have a case here of maybe some common sense legislation that says, hey, if we're having a Spare the Air Day, you don't use tools like that. I mean, it's not like we're telling people, well, you can't use a chainsaw, and yeah, we know there's a tree about ready to fall on you, but wait for tomorrow. I mean, I don't think anybody's been harmed by not using a leaf blower for a day. But this is the type of thing that if one town like Los Gatos does it, maybe it catches on. And it becomes one of those things that we start to lose some of these significant causes of pollution on Spare the Air Days. I'll even tell you, I saw a Campbell City employee using a gas-powered leaf blower on the Los Gatos Creek Trail on the Friday when it was 104 and we were in the middle of that stretch of Spare the Air Days. I was appalled. So I hope that you can somehow figure out how to have legislation. You can't legislate good manners and common sense, but it's one of the things, if you're a contractor and that's something that the contractee expects you to do, you can always say, hey, I'm not allowed to do it today, it's against the law. It's kind of a win-win situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Mr. Glickman?
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Burke. About a year ago, approximately so, the council considered actually legislating against leaf blowers, not just on Spare the Air Day. We didn't achieve a consensus then, so I was wondering what your thoughts might be on a broader view.
Well, I think, I've never used a gas-powered leaf blower. I've used an electric one when I was trying to blow leaves off of a shake roof. But in general, I think they do have their place, but usually in the small yards that exist in Los Gatos, they're not really, they're superfluous. And I see a lot of people that, are contractors, contract yard maintenance people. I'm not going to call them gardeners because I don't think they have the gardener training. Half of what they do is walk around, kick up dust, and blow leaves into the neighbor's yard. So I would support a broader thing, but like cell phones, it's easier to say let's limit you to hands-free cell phones than no cell phones at all. It's easier to take a small step than a big one.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you. Anyone else under verbal communication? No? Okay, then we will move on to our public hearing. We have one this evening. This is a continuation of an item from our last meeting. This is a request for a 7-lot residential subdivision and approval to demolish a single-family residence and 3-unit apartment building built prior to 1941, changing the zoning to a planned development, and it's on properties located at 17005 and 17017 Roberts Road. So we'll begin with a brief staff report to bring us up to date on what's happened over the last 2 weeks. Then we will talk to the applicant. We'll have up to 5 minutes, and then we will reopen it for public comment if there is any. Mr. Suda.
Thank you. This item involves 17005 to 17017 Roberts Road. This is a request for a plan development and an architectural and site application to demolish a single-family residence and a 3-unit apartment building and to construct 7 single-family homes on a 1.1-acre site. The item was continued from the Town Council meeting of September 18th. Council's direction was that the applicant should address the issue regarding access to the rear yards of the adjoining Victoriana townhomes, and then secondly, propose improvements to the overall site plan or the development. In response, the applicant has submitted a letter detailing the items that were studied. First, the issue of the rear yard access was evaluated by the applicant and the adjoining property owners, and they have reached an agreement according to the applicant, as well as a proposal for a cost-sharing agreement. The location of the access is shown on attachment 14, or option D, and essentially the property owner, the applicant, is going to transfer a 3-foot wide swath of land adjacent to that southerly property line to the adjoining property owners in the townhomes. If Town Council approves the project, staff is recommending that we add a condition of approval allowing staff to review the final design and the security of that access area at the architectural and site stage. In addition, the applicant has proposed to reduce the overall area of the private road. This allows for the side setbacks for lots 3 through 5 to be increased from 7 to 8 feet. It allows for the rear setback of lot 6 to be increased from 19 to 20 feet. Provides for increased open space for lots 3 through 6, and relocates 2 guest parking spaces adjacent to lot 2, which abuts Blossom Hill Road. The applicant also studied rotating the homes on lots 1 and 2. These are the homes that directly abut Blossom Hill Road, and that's shown on option E. The rear yards were previously located between the 2 homes on lots 1 and 2. Now those homes have been rotated. The rear yards are adjacent to Blossom Hill Road. The location, the sound wall, is much closer to Blossom Hill Road and to the existing trees along the street, and also exposes a greater amount of that sound wall to the street. Option E also clusters units 1 and 2. It essentially moves the home on lot 2 in a westerly direction and puts it closer to lot 1. It does increase the amount of open space that is provided to the east of lot 2. Those are the major changes that the applicant has proposed, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions of staff at this time? No? Okay. Then let's go ahead and have the applicant come forward. And again, you have up to 5 minutes between you.
Thank you. Mayor McNett and members of the Town Council, my name is Laura Worthington Forbes. I'm with RBF Consulting, and tonight I'm here representing Eden Homes. With me tonight is the architect, Louis Liu, and the property owner, Khurram Iqbal. We did prepare a letter, as Mr. Sudo had noted. It is in your council packet, and at the risk of being too repetitive, I do want to hit on just a couple of key points. Before I do so, though, I would be remiss if I didn't express our team's heartfelt concern for Mr. Bud Lortz, who has been injured, and our hearts and our wishes for a most speedy recovery and rehabilitation are with him tonight. I'm not used to being here and not seeing Mr. Lortz at the left side of my peripheral vision, so we do wish him the best of a speedy recovery. 2 weeks ago, you charged us with coming to some type of agreement with the neighbors that are adjacent to our property, and I am pleased to stand before you tonight to note that indeed, after this 2-week period, we have come to an agreement. And that agreement, as Mr. Suda had noted, has established a transfer of ownership for a swath of land that's approximately 3 feet wide by 105 feet long. And it will provide continued and maintained access to the rear yards for units 2, 3, and 4 of the Victoriana property owners. What would that path look like? We have 3 options that we have explored with the property owners. These options are all addressed in your packet. The first option being option A, which shows just a landscaping screen. A second option being a wooden fence, which would have just a slightly lower height than the fence on the property line. And the third option being a wrought iron or a picket fence, and we're calling this option C. Each of these options have been explored with the property owners, and it's important to note, though, that whether individually or collectively, that these options are really at the discretion of the property owners themselves. In response to Councilman Glickman and Wasserman's comments on tweaking the plan to improve it just a little bit further, we have been in conversations with the Planning Department, with Public Works, and with the Fire Department. And what the Fire Department is now allowing us to do is to shorten the one leg of the hammerhead turnaround between lots 5 and 6. And since there is an emergency egress to Blossom Hill, this is possible to do. What this does for us is increase the amount of open space by decreasing the amount of pervious space and the private driveway. It also, maybe more importantly, allows a more private space between units 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the next slide, you'll see a 3D schematic, which provides another perspective. It really shows how shortening of the private road provides the option of relocating the 2 guest parking spaces that were originally situated between lots 5 and 6 to the common open space area adjacent to Unit 1. Units 3, 4, 5, and 6 have been respaced then to provide an additional foot of side yard setback. So we're going from the originally proposed 7 feet to now an 8-foot setback between the side yards. And on lot 6, or unit 6, we're showing a 20-foot rear yard setback, which allows us to eliminate deviations from the RM 5 to 12 guidelines in 6 locations. In response to Councilwoman Spector, we have developed an additional option, what we're calling option E, that reorients units 1 and 2 so that the fronts of the units face the private drive and the backs of the units face onto Blossom Hill. And what that does is exposes a greater amount of living area or backyard living space to additional sound exposure. And it also eliminates the appearance of the front elevations or eyes on the street, if you will, from Blossom Hill. And again, as an option E in 3D, we've shown you on this slide that the sound wall or the sound fence, if you will, is approximately 90 feet in length as compared to 45 feet in length if we went with modified option C or D. In addition to that, because of the spacing of the trees on Blossom Hill, the mature trees, a 2-foot berm would not be possible with this option. It's just a little too close to those trees. Instead, there would need to be an 8-foot fence or sound wall as compared to a 2-foot berm and a 6-foot fence. I have just a couple more slides. Should I wrap up or?
Yes, go ahead. I'll ask you the question to please. What else would you be saying in the next 2 slides?
Just want to show a comparison of the fences. Just this perspective just shows you the differentiation between the shorter fence set back a little further and what would happen if you had a fence closer to Blossom Hill with the perspective of it seeming taller. And then finally, just to reiterate our preference for approval of option D, this option does allow us an approval with the property owners for access to the Victoriana townhomes. It does increase the open space and reduces the total impervious site coverage. It eliminates a number of deviations from the RM 512 guidelines in 6 different locations. It allows us to park the guest parking in the common open space, and most importantly, it does also allow us an overall design that has been tweaked and improved. So with that, I'm happy to address any additional questions you may have.
Thank you. Let's see what questions council has for you. Mr. Glickman?
I suspect I know the answer to this, but I just want to get it on the record. Given your, and I'm going to call it generosity because that's what it is, you gave some land to the neighbors to address the concerns that the council raised. If they were to say, well, you know, we'd like that access way to be a bit wider, since this is now their land, that would then be their issue. And I'll also sort of reflect this to the staff as well. So it would be my understanding that if they wish to do that, then the homeowners association would need to come to the town, Randy, or could they just decide on their own to make it wider and decrease their backyards?
That's something that we could look at. We're suggesting that that the final design of that be approved at the ANS stage, and that's something we can look at in partnership with the homeowners.
Okay, but the ball, if I understand it, will now be very much in the condo owners.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mrs. Spector?
Thank you. You were speaking quickly and articulately, but I wasn't following some of the things. With regard to D and E, do either of those now have common area, open space?
They do.
Okay, yes. And I was looking at E, and it appeared to be to the east of Unit 2. Is that correct? Yes.
Correct.
And on site plan D, where is it?
Well, it's really kind of the same area, just much smaller.
All right, could you put your light on it, because I don't see it on my drawing.
This would be the common space right here.
Below the 2 parking spaces?
Mr. Liu, could you please speak into the mic?
Yes, it would be right in this general area here. There's not as much common open space as there is in the option E, let's say.
And the public parking spaces are those now on common area land?
Yes, they are.
On both D and E?
Yes. But on option E, we didn't really modify the rest of the other half of that design because we were really trying to show the configuration of the 2 units, 1 and 2. So, for example, this is option D. This part here has been revised. In option E, we did not bother to revise this, but we could make that portion match the other option D.
And lastly, you referenced your letter of September 25th. You state in there that you have been working with 7 units for 2 years, correct? You're working, I think, with CDAC and with staff. But you understood that when you came to the Planning Commission and the Council, you might or might not get 7 units, correct?
That was understood, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Apparently not. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have you come up at the end of the public comment period. Okay. And let's see, who wants to speak on this tonight? Citizen Ray. No. Please come first, because you had your car in first.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, cannot believe what I'm seeing in the public packet tonight. I've been doing this kind of work off and on for 40 years, and I've never seen a private sales document in a public land use presentation. I cannot believe it. Proof positive of what I'm saying, that the city manager's office of Los Gatos has deteriorated to the point where it's nothing more than a real estate consulting service and maybe a sales service. I call it Fagoni Lortz, okay? Town real estate dealers. And that private document in this public process is proof positive of exactly what I'm saying. It's unbelievable to me what's going on in this community, how these employees are attempting to give away the integrity, the validity of the public process, okay? They mask their actions with supposed dignity of the public document. Also, speaking to Mr. Wasserman, could not believe last time, Mr. Wasserman, you know, you and Ms. McNutt and Mr. Sleesman haven't spent one day on the Planning Commission in your whole life, okay? And what your input into this proposal is, again, evidence of that to me, okay? You don't go back to your general plan, your zoning ordinance, which is RM5-12. The standards of RM5-12 are what apply. You have a range of 5 units to 12, and the town has the privilege under land use process of California to make that determination. You don't take orders from these fly-by-night developers, okay? And you don't seem to understand that, Mr. Wasserman. I keep hearing words from you about, oh, well, what we approve is selling well. I can't believe it. I mean, the real estate philosophy all over again. And Ms. McNutt, you know, I've spoken to you privately, and I cannot believe your stated position about, well, there's no open space in our neighborhood. Well, shucks. I drove up there. It's nothing but open space, okay? As far as the eye can see.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
I'm sorry I can't finish. I'd like to nudge you a little bit further.
Yes.
Just nudge you.
Yes, we were happy to have you in the neighborhood. Our next speaker is Michael Scott.
Good evening. As the meeting a couple of weeks ago, I would like to reiterate my support for this development. I'm very pleased to hear that the problem with Victorianas has been resolved. And as far as I can see, this leaves one big concern, and it seems to be the word density. One or two of you have mentioned this several times. You're concerned about the density, whether it should be 7 houses, 6, or whatever. And I just don't understand this, because no one's really said, well, what is wrong with the density? Everyone says, well, I don't like this, or why is it 7 houses? Why did you pick 7? but nobody said what's wrong with 7, the density for 7. And I just don't understand that, because from what I do understand, it's within the limits set by the town. It's certainly in keeping with the local neighborhood. In fact, there's probably less density in these houses that are proposed than in most of the properties surrounding the area. So I would ask that you all reconsider your thoughts on density, and hopefully we can get some agreement to go ahead with this proposal. The developers appear to have worked pretty hard this last 2 weeks trying to resolve the various questions, and I ask you to reconsider your thoughts on the density, and let's make this a nice area rather than the eyesore that it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Any questions for Mr. Scott? Thank you very much. Next speaker is Michael Burke.
Thank you. I'd like to start off tonight by remembering something Council Glickman said at the last meeting. Everything we do here sets a precedent. I'd like to word it a different way. Everything you do there sets an expectation. You set an expectation on what is acceptable in every decision you make. Tonight you'll be setting the expectation on what optimal quantity and use of open space is. You'll also be setting the bar on what good design is. You're setting something else tonight. You are setting a de facto policy on rewarding property owners for allowing their property to become run down. Everybody says, last speaker, this property needs to be redeveloped because it's in such bad shape. Well, the question is, are you going to allow a higher density than you might otherwise because they've let it run down? Is the future for property development in Los Gatos buy property, let it become blighted, and then redevelop it? But that's for another day. Let's concentrate on this development. The existing zoning would allow 3, maybe 4 homes. The proposed zone change will allow 7. That's almost double. These 7 homes will be advertised with an average of about 2,300 square feet of living space. Yes, they're going to count the basements in the sales literature. Los Gatos property, about $500 a square foot. This is a $9.5 million development. For that amount of money, the town should see a better design than one that requires a 7-foot or 8-foot, whatever, cast concrete sound wall along Blossom Hill Road. We expect to see sound walls in Los Angeles, not Los Gatos. Even the best sound wall is ugly and attracts graffiti. You don't want to set the expectation that sound walls are good. If you've been on University Avenue when a VTA bus is pulling away from a stop sign, or if some Harleys light it up, it's just as noisy as it is on Blossom Hill Road. I don't think you want to see sound walls on University. I bring up the sound walls for 3 reasons. 1, it's what people are going to see when they look at this development from the outside. 2, the sound wall was a point of concern at CDAC. It's still there. And 3, we even talk about sound walls and solid fencing of this nature and discourage it in the town center plan. With a good design and proper orientation, you could eliminate the need for that sound wall. I ask you to look at the open space. Is this optimal? Not acceptable, but optimal. That's what the PD regulation says. You're setting the bar for this. An architect can only be as good as his client allows him to be. The client or the architect must work within the goals and requirements that the client set. I do not know what those goals and requirements were, but I bet that creating an optimum quantity and use of open space was not one. Tonight, I ask you to send us back for redesign with additional requirements. Those 2 would be
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any questions for Mr. Burke? Mrs. Spector?
I'll do a Mayor McNutt. And what would those be, if you had a chance to explain?
The 2 requirements would be that you would send it back and say, 1 is provide a design that does not require a sound wall along the public streets. And 2, that the project shall be designed as to create an optimum quantity and use of open space. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Sally Webb.
Good evening, Mayor McNutt and Town Council members. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am one of the townhouse owners who did come to an agreement with Eden Homes. I've never done anything like this before, but the bottom line is that Eden Homes owns that land, and we wanted access, so we bought a strip of land. I think that's a good solution. We all seem to be happy with it. We'll be able to have our access, and I don't mind paying for the land because when he purchased the land, he had to pay for it as well. So I feel quite satisfied with that. I'm very, very happy that we will be able to get out of our backyards, and that was the main concern for me. Councilmember Wasserman, you had mentioned a couple of weeks ago security issues. And being a single mom, that's also my issue. So you can rest assured that we're going to make sure it's safe for our own families as well as any of the kids around Fisher walking by. It will not be an open gate where people could look through. We will make sure that nobody goes behind that gate except for us, and we will be able to see down in that area. So all the homes all around can clearly look and see if anybody was there, and we could take care of that situation. I wanted to say that because they were willing to work with us, I do really appreciate it. We all spent hours trying to come up with an agreement, and I do support Eden Homes, and they are working hard to try and get a good development, and I'm not going to have any issues with whatever they choose to do as long as we can keep our access. They gave in to us, so now I'm willing to give in to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions. And we do not. Thank you.
Thanks.
And the last card I have this evening is Ling Shane.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Council members, and town staff. I was here 2 weeks ago, again, strongly against this building project. I'm here today to confirm that we have reached an agreement with Mr. Curran for the backdoor access issue. 3 of the townhouse owners would purchase 3 feet of his line for an alley that can be used by the landlord owners. And during the negotiation process, Mr. Curran showed his good faith in resolving this issue with us by terms that have been accepted by both parties. Since the access is the major issue, with other issues, so that we against this building development project before, and is fortunately resolved. So I would like to withdraw all our other complaints and I would like to be instead to support this development project. Thank you.
Thank you. And no questions. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else this evening who wishes to speak on this project? Seeing none, would the applicant like to come back up and do a summary / rebuttal / answering questions in up to 3 minutes?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor McNutt. Just a couple of comments. In response to Mr. Burke's comments, I think many of his comments we have addressed in detail at either prior Planning Commission or prior council meetings. One comment in particular, though, in terms of the look of the sound wall, as I have noted earlier, and I think we have provided a sample as part of your packet, this is going to look more like a decorative fence than it is what you would call a stereotypical sound wall that we would see on a freeway. We did have 2 options, option A and B, which did not include a sound wall, and Planning Commission did not care for either of those options, which is why we went to the modified option C. And then finally, there was a comment made that the development team has allowed the property to be run down. I'd like to clarify that this property was run down prior to its purchase by the current property owner. And the reason it was run down, or the attempt to redevelop it, had failed by 2 prior property owners. So there was no intent of running the property down per se. It's a matter of time in trying to secure an approval for a redeveloped property. My last comment is that we just really appreciate all the assistance and the collaboration that town staff has provided us through this process, and we're happy to answer any additional questions that you may have and are looking forward to your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions of the applicant? No, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council for additional questions of staff or comments, deliberation, motions, whatever you would like to do. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to open it up just in response to what Mr. Davis said previously, where he said, I said, what we approve is selling well. That was taken out of context. What I did is I simply mentioned that although I was concerned about the density of past projects, I noted that they sold out. So I just wanted to straighten that out. Then I had a question of Mr. Suda, if I may, Madam Mayor, regarding this project. Thank you. Mr. Suda, would you please, comments have been made about the sound wall this, the sound wall required, not in plans A and B, Planning Commission wanted it in, the decibel level from Blossom Hill. Given the project that is before us and the option D that is the developer's preference, it's not, is it true that we're requiring them to put in a sound wall because the decibel level of noise coming from Blossom Hill?
Yes, that requirement comes out of the environmental review process. Under the CEQA guidelines, we need to make sure a project meets 2 noise standards. One is the noise standards, outdoor noise standards contained within the town's general plan, and then secondly, the interior noise standards as outlined in the Uniform Building Code. So in order to mitigate the outdoor noise level to the town's general plan goals, that noise wall was required.
Go ahead.
Thank you. If I may, when you say mitigate the noise level, you mean for the future residents of those homes? Is what you're, that's the purpose of the sound wall.
Correct.
To give some sort of peace and quiet inside the home. And the proposal that's before us in option D is in David. That current version of the sound wall is approximately 45 feet long as compared to some other versions that are 90 feet, and it has a 2-foot berm and then a 6-foot fence on top.
That's right.
So it's not an 8-foot solid fence. Thank you.
Mr. Glickman.
Okay. At the last meeting, we looked at this project. I think that a number of people on council felt that it was an acceptable project. It was a project that could be approved. And we expressed some concerns over issues that the adjacent neighbors had raised and some issues that we had raised. And we sent the applicant off to address these issues. And now they've come back tonight and the issues have been addressed. So I was thinking of a comment that I believe it was Ms. Sean made, and she used the word good faith. So I would think that after 2.5 years, that having done what we told them to do, that we should be able to now move forward on this expeditiously. And in support of doing that, I'm going to make a motion to approve the project under option D with the modifications that have been proposed to us tonight, which the neighbors have now indicated they accept. So everybody seems in favor of this.
Okay, Mr. Glickman, wait just a moment. Mr. Korb. Mr. Korb. We have a whole series of motions laid out for us here. Is Mr. Glickman's motion appropriate, or do we need to take care of some of this other items first?
Mr. Glickman's motion as a final action would be inappropriate until the other actions are taken. However, you may treat his motion, if Mr. Glickman will accept it, as a request for consensus at this time, just to see what the rest of the council thinks of that idea. Then when that discussion is completed, then you may know better what to do with the other action items that must precede the final motion.
Okay, Mr. Glickman, would you like
And
to
it is
rephrase that?
it is certainly my desire at this point to seek and express the support of the council for moving forward with option D.
Okay, let's see what council has to say. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'm in agreement as well as far as option D and what we asked of the applicants. Reason being for that is Mr. Glickman touched on the reasons that we asked the applicant to resolve the issue with the neighbors. The biggest concern they had was for access, not being landlocked, and the applicant has done that. In addition, I look back here on the whole PD idea, and I look at the requirement for exemplary design. And in my 3.5, almost 4 years on council, I have seen very, very few projects that had what I consider a Mayberry RFD, setbacks around the front and sides all around where you can have a fence and a yard and the kids are safe inside and the dog's safe inside. And this project does that. And although the setbacks may not be as large or as wide in some areas as they might be required to, this council does have the ability to tweak and to vary things. So when I look at 8-foot side setbacks, and I see projects in the past with 4-foot setbacks and 0 lot lines, I say, bravo, 8-foot setbacks. When we asked the applicant to work with the neighbors, even though they didn't have to, the concern in the back about their getting access and emergency access and maintenance access, they did that and that was resolved. And when I see these 7 homes, and the argument has been 7 homes versus 6 homes, and it's zoned 5 to 12, some of us may feel 6 is more preferable. I'm fine with 7 because of the design of the 7. You know, they could have had 5 homes on here that I would have thought was too massive, too intense, too dense. I've seen designs where more number of homes look less intense and less dense. It all comes down to design for me. And the design of these 7 homes with the placement makes sense to me, and I'm looking forward to visiting them if and when they get finished. But I also want to take this moment to thank the Planning Commission. It's the planning commissioners, and we had a former planning commissioner here speak this evening. It's the Planning Commission that has made this project become what it is today. They raised concerns. Those concerns have been addressed. They brought up ideas. They requested additional suggestions and modifications and versions, and all those came before us where we're now into version A, B, C, D, E, I think, something like that. It was the Planning Commission's work before the council that has made this project what I think will be an exemplary design and therefore qualify as a PD.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I think there was one question that has not been answered in contrast to what Mr. Glickman's proposal is, and that is the question of reduction of the number of units. I know in the last discussion 2 weeks ago, that issue was raised. I raised it. Councilwoman Spector raised it as well. And indeed, it is zoned RM 512, but 5 is in there. And in answer to Mr. Michael Scott's question about what is the issue of density, I think it precisely comes down to how does this particular lot accommodate the number of proposed houses, and does it or does it not accommodate those in a fashion that is natural and also allows us to develop those parts of our expectation that are significant, such as open space. I have difficulty in my observation of this on site, seeing how what we are establishing here is something of quality design. I was out there again last night, and to me the structures loom over Blossom Hill. And in some ways I'm trying to validate the renderings with my observation. As I look at the renderings, they seem to me to indicate for a great deal of space between Blossom Hill and the structures. when I'm out there on the street, it looks to me like those structures are right up against Blossom Hill practically. And so this supposed gain of frontage against Blossom Hill that is proposed by this particular alignment seems not to be in conformity to what I see out there on the street. And I think what we would see if this were to go forward exactly in this current configuration is that whatever supposed gain you're going to see in the differential between the lots 1 and 2 in proposal, I guess it's E versus D, is negligible. And I go back to the question of, is this the appropriate number of homes when the appropriate square footage is on the lot as it is presented us? And I have difficulty seeing it. I still don't see the back-to-back lots 1 and 2 as presenting themselves appropriately. It seems like an odd configuration. The question of the sound wall, which runs just in the backyards and the Blossom Hill frontage, is supposed to mitigate sound from Blossom Hill, and yet when I look at Lot 7, does that also have a sound wall, or is that merely a good neighbor fence? Is what? I'm sorry. I should not ask you. I should ask our staff. Is the fence as indicated adjacent to Lot 7 at Blossom Hill Road? Is that a sound wall or is that a fence?
It's a sound wall also.
Okay, so we have an additional sound wall at that side of the property. Because I don't think we've mentioned that so far tonight. I noticed when you pointed out the extra open space gained by the revision, the preferred revision, well, you weren't able to point it out that it exists on the previous plan where you had the homes configured approaching the private road, and it was obvious where the open space existed then. But when you attempted to point out the open space in your preferred plan, there actually is no open space there. It's the street, as far as I can tell. My feeling is that as I look at this asks for redesign. I think you've made great strides in working with the neighbors and taking care of the problem of access to those condominium units. I applaud you for that. I applaud you for the dialogue that took place. And I appreciate the fact that neighbors want that access. But I do feel that there is still much work to do. My preference would be that we take a look at this and see if there is possible reduction in the number of units. The only objection I've heard is that it doesn't pencil in. And when I read your letter, the comment was, if we have to come under 7, then we'll have to put it back on the market. Now that's a very narrow window for a particular marketing strategy, I would assume. So for my purposes, I'm not ready to go there. I cannot approve it tonight. I hope you appreciate the fact that I would prefer to see you go back and look for redesign with 5 or 6 units and see if we could somehow better utilize the site as it is presented us.
Mrs. Spector, do you wish to speak at this time?
Are you looking for us to speak to the consensus or to a potential motion?
The consensus about a potential motion.
All right, well then, okay. I would not have, if this were a real motion as opposed to a consensus motion, I would not be supporting it. I first of all want to start out by commending the applicant for working with the neighbors and the neighbors for working with the applicant and resolving the issue of the easement. I certainly think that settlements and resolutions of that type are far preferable to disputes and lawsuits, and easement litigation is very, very difficult. So I commend you on that. That being said, had you not reached a resolution on the easement, that would not, to me, be a basis for denying the application. On the flip side, having reached a resolution on the easement, that does not supply for me a basis for approving the application. The easement issue is totally separate from our land use ordinances and the criteria we use in evaluating a plan development. In evaluating the plan development, and I said it 2 weeks ago and I'll reiterate today, we are looking to determine if there is an optimum quantity and use of open space and good design. Even those individuals on this council who seem to be supporting the application will say that the design is okay. And Exhibit D, or Choice D, that is the consensus motion before us, has absolutely no open space. So the individuals on this council who may be favoring this motion are ignoring the ordinance. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right because we have had a history of architects and developers who have come before us and who have had to comply with this ordinance. If we want to vary the ordinance, then we can either change it in the future or we can ask the applicant to come in for a variance. But once this ordinance is on the book and the applicant is coming before us, then we should apply it. It's fair. It's fair to all the people here today and all the people who have been here before them. I also am concerned with the message we are sending to our Planning Commission, who turned this down with a 7-0 unanimous vote, a planning commission that was enforcing the ordinances that we have told them to enforce. I disagree that the application or the applicant has now addressed all of the concerns raised by the Planning Commission. The applicant has absolutely not done that. And what we are getting, I know one of the speakers spoke to the what we will have, but what we are getting are 7 homes that will, as I determined in adding up the numbers, be somewhere between 2,500 and 2,900 square feet that will sell for almost $2 million each. And with regard to the individual who asked, well, you know, what is the problem with the density? The problem with the density is it prohibits good design, which is what we're supposed to get with the plan development.
Mr. Glickman, did you want to make a comment before I speak?
Just wanted to direct a question to staff, if I may, because I just wanted to clarify my understanding. In Ms. Spector, Councilwoman Spector, if I misunderstood you, I apologize. But if you are suggesting that our action tonight is not in conformance with the law, then I'd like our town attorney to speak to that.
I'd have to know what provision of the code Councilmember Spector is referring to. I don't understand that this is not in conformance with the PD ordinance and the discretion that is vested in council, but if there's a specific section I'm missing, then I need to take a look at that.
I will take a few moments when other people are speaking to find the exact code section. I will be able to do that. And with regard to the issue of discretion, while there might be some discretion when it goes to the concept of what is or is not good design, there is no discretion when it comes to requiring the optimum quantity and use of open space when none is being provided.
Mr. Glickman?
Just a follow-up comment, if I might, because I agree with the concern that was expressed and the support that was expressed by, I think it was Councilmember Wasserman for our Planning Commission. They have a tough job to do, and part of their tough job is trying to figure out what it is that we want them to do and what we're directing them to do. And if I recall in the staff report that came to us when we first considered this at the previous meeting, there had been a pretty clear request from staff for direction from the council on projects like this, on what it was that we wanted them to enforce, to seek, to do. And I think that requirement is still very clear, and the burden lies squarely upon us. And I think that it is our responsibility as expeditiously as possible to make our vision as clear as possible so the Planning Commission can go about implementing and enforcing it. The model that I have in mind is our Hillside Standards and Guidelines, which are crystal clear. They say, do this, don't do this, here's the chart. And people come to the desk and say, or the planning department and say, I have a proposal. And they can say, yeah, this either does or doesn't meet our standards. When we don't have clear standards, then we have a struggle like this every single time. So with respect and giving respect to our staff and commission, we need to clarify what it is we want them to do, and then I have no doubt that they'll do it very well.
Thank you. Where I am out on this is if this were to be a real motion, that I would be supporting it. And the reason is, I start back with the general plan, and one of the elements of the general plan on looking to build a variety of housing types for all economic segments. And I am very fond of these smaller lot single-family homes, especially on an infill project like this where the piece of land is difficult. It is surrounded by two busy streets, commercial, multifamily, and it would have been easier for the property owner to come in with a multifamily project and try to max out the numbers, that 5 to 12 number. And, we always can use more multifamily, but the small single-family home, I think, is very appealing to new families trying to get a foothold in the Los Gatos market. The rezoning of it into a planned development, the definition of a planned development is that it should be used when developments to make them more consistent with site characteristics. And again, I think that's what this allows it to do, because it is surrounded by apartments on one side, by condominiums on the other side, and busy streets and commercial. In terms of the open space, it says right here in our staff report that the town's residential development standards has a requirement of 600 square feet of open space for a 3-bedroom single-family home, and this project is providing 800 to 1,400 square feet of private open space per single-family home. So I think that we've met and exceeded that requirement. Good design. I agree with Mr. Wasserman. When I look at this, I think it's going to be a very pleasant place to live, and I think it meets that expectation of good design. In terms of the Planning Commission, when I read through the 3 sets of transcripts that we had, they struggled with this, and they were all over the place in terms of the suggestions that they were trying to find a good solution. And my take on the 7-0 vote of that final meeting was, we need to move this on to council at the request of the applicant, because we cannot come up with 100% agreement on what direction we want to give this applicant to do next. So very justly, it comes to the town council. This is, we make these kinds of decisions, and I'm ready to make this one. So, Mr. Glickman, if you're ready, Mr. Korb is going to run you through this whole list of motions that we have to make.
Very good. I'm now prepared to make a real motion, having sensed and confirmed that the consensus of the majority is to do so. So I will begin, if I'm correct, Mr. Korb, in making the negative declaration that appears in Exhibit L of Attachment 7.
That's correct.
And
Okay.
actually, Mr. Korb had mentioned to me the other day that we could do those first 3 all together as one motion, if you would like, just to speed things along.
And I certainly will do so.
I should mention, though, that in doing so, the required findings have to be articulated along with the motion. So,
okay. Then that be. Okay, I'm going to seek Attachment 1 as we speak.
it's Attachment 1 to the first staff report.
Okay. Is that in the packet, or is that something we retained from last week?
If staff has a copy of that, it's very difficult to find these because we've got so many sets of papers here.
Rather than hunt, I see it coming my way. Thank you very much, Mr. Korb. So I will make the required findings for 17005 and 17017 Roberts Road, PD application PD0501. The findings are, as required by Section 29100930C and E of the Town Code, for the demolition of a historic 3-unit apartment building. Under subsection C, demolition of historic structures, demolition permit for historic structure may be only approved if the structure poses an imminent safety hazard, the structure is determined not to have any special historical and architectural, aesthetic, or interest or value. I believe that's the case. And that the architecture and site approval proceedings, we shall consider maintaining the town's housing stock, which we are, preserving historically or architectural significant buildings or structures, which we've considered. The property owner's desire or capacity to maintain the structure and the economic utility of the building or the structure. And as required by the town's traffic impact policy, the benefits of the project to the town outweigh the impact of increased traffic. I believe they do. I can make that finding. And the town council must make a finding that the zone change is consistent with the general plan, and I believe that the consensus is that we have, and it does. So those are the findings that are required to be made.
And then, Mr. Glickman, would you like to also have your motion include adoption of the mitigation monitoring plan?
I believe that we had I said that this motion would cover the first 3 points, so the answer is yes.
I just wanted to say it out loud for those who weren't following the paperwork. Is that okay, Mr. Korb?
Yes.
Okay, we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, and further discussion. Mr. Wasserman.
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As far as this goes, as far as the PD, design excellence, density, what size the homes are, that kind of thing, Councilmember Spector is entirely correct in saying these will be advertised as 2,300 square foot homes of living space. But by our own rules, they're 1,808 to 1,986 because we don't count underground living space in what we do. So these units qualify. They meet those requirements. There was an issue brought up about open space that Mayor McNutt made reference to. For myself, I realized that if our PD rules were written in stone, unbendable, and mind you, they were created by our predecessors, if they were unbendable, not looked at per application, there would be no reason for any application to come before the town council, because the project would come in, you'd say, oh, this is a PD, these are our requirements, and they apply to any and every site in the town of Los Gatos. Well, that's not how it is. We have a range, for instance, 5 to 12. It doesn't say 7, it doesn't say 9, it doesn't say 11, it doesn't say on a Tuesday and a Thursday it's 6. It says 5 to 12. And so some projects, the 5, 6, or 7 seems to be more appropriate. And on some projects, the higher end of the range seems to be more appropriate. A lot of it has to do with design. A lot of it has to do with the piece of property that you have. If you have a piece of property that's evenly shaped and not surrounded by arterials where a sound wall is necessary because of the decibel levels coming off of that road, if this was in a more residential area, then the requirements would not be the same because the noise would not be the same. So each and every application that comes before us is located in a different place, surrounded by different developments, commercial, residential, multifamily, et cetera, designed by a different architect. So that's why this town council is charged with saying, is this appropriate as a PD in this location the way that it's designed? For myself, it's a 7-house mini neighborhood with front setbacks and side setbacks that are bigger than both the Vasona Ranch project that was created and bigger than the homes that can be built in the historic Almond Grove district. So some people like that, some people don't. For myself, I like this design. I like the fact you can have a fence around your whole home and your dog and children can be in there. I'm not a fan of 0 lot lines. I'm not a fan of 4-foot setbacks. Do I prefer this over a townhouse development? You betcha. And so I'm supporting this, but it's for all those reasons. But again, going back, the Planning Commission did what they were charged to do. Now the project is brought to the Town Council. The Town Council looks at this as a unique application. Nothing before has come to the Town Council exactly like this. Nothing after tonight will come to the Town Council exactly like this, in the same location, with the same shaped property, with the same types of streets. Everything that comes before us is different and unique. And we're making a decision here, we may make a decision here, based on a majority, maybe 5-0, it may be 3-2, I don't know what it is, but that's what we're elected to do. And I'm proud to be part of that system.
Any other discussion on the current motion? Okay, well, again, we have a motion to make the negative declaration and adopt the mitigation monitoring plan, and the required findings have been made. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-2. I'll now direct the clerk to read the title in preparation for a motion to waive the reading.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the zoning ordinance affecting a zone change from RM 5-12 to RM 5-12 PD for properties located at 17005 and 17017 Roberts Road.
Okay, and a motion to waive the reading, please.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Oh, motion carries 5-0. And now, Mr. Glickman.
Okay, well, now that the clerk has read the title, I would then move to introduce the ordinance to effectuate plan development application PD 05-1 as indicated in option D before us and as indicated in attachment 2.
And Madam Mayor, before there's a second, may I suggest a couple of cleanup items on the ordinance?
Yes, sir.
First, if you go to page 3 of the ordinance, it would be section 5, under item number 1 concerning approval, the question mark at the top of the page, the question marks should be replaced with attachment 14 of the, what is the date of that, Randy?
September 28th.
September 28th, 2006 staff report. And that would be the option D. And on I'm not sure of the page number, but that condition number 16 be followed by a new condition number 17, and the conditions thereafter be renumbered accordingly. And that condition number 17 would read that the proposal reflected in Exhibit A of letter dated September 24th, 2006, which is in parenthesis attachment 13, must be finalized in a manner satisfactory to the town attorney. That condition would ensure that as a condition of final approval that there has to be documentation demonstrating that the arrangement regarding access is finalized and properly recorded.
Thank you, and I will include those conditions and modifications to the ordinance that I have just suggested the introduction of to my motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Mr. Wasserman?
Yeah, just for the record, I believe, I don't know if this is picky or not, Mr. Korb said September 24th, and I have it as a letter of September 25th. Just.
Why don't we just simply leave it as attachment 13?
Okay.
I'm sure it's the 25th because the 24th was a Sunday because it was my daughter's birthday. Yes.
The motion includes the appropriate date.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries 3-2, and that's the end of this agenda item. We will now move on in the agenda to other business. And we're going to have a special presentation about Los Gatos Prepared. So let me begin by reading to you the proclamation, and then we'll have a brief staff report by Chief Seaman. We do have a, did I read this last time? No. We do have a proclamation proclaiming October, the month of October, as Los Gatos Prepared Month. And the proclamation says that whereas natural disasters can occur at any time and any place, and whereas October 17th is the anniversary of the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, which caused serious damage to Los Gatos homes and businesses, even though it was not as strong as the major earthquake predicted for this region sometime in the future. And whereas potential contagious health diseases such as the pandemic flu could have significant impacts on families, schools, businesses, and hospitals. And whereas in the event of these and other disasters, local governments will do their best to provide vital assistance to ensure the health and safety of the community at large, but may not have the breadth and depth of resources to help everyone immediately. And whereas it is important for residents and businesses to be prepared to be self-sufficient for a period of at least 72 hours in the event of an earthquake and a period of between 2 and 4 weeks in the event of a pandemic flu. And whereas the town would like to encourage every resident and business in Los Gatos to have the awareness, skills, and resources necessary to be self-sufficient in the event of an earthquake or possible flu pandemic. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Diane McNutt, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim the month of October 2006 as Los Gatos Prepared Month within our town, and ask our residents and businesses to take advantage of information provided at council meetings, that would be tonight, at farmers markets on October 8th and 15th, neighborhood get-togethers on October 17th, and the town's website, www.losgatosprepared.org, to take steps to be self-sufficient in the event of a natural or health disaster. And Chief Seaman, you can now amplify on what it is that we are going to do during this month.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Scott Seaman, Police Chief. And Madam Mayor, you said it very, very well. Thank you. With October as Los Gatos Prepared Month, the police department and the town government are joining together to work with the community to make sure that we get off on a good start toward everyone in the community being well prepared in any kind of a disaster. But given that the range of disasters to prepare for can be a long list, we're focusing on two. One is a natural disaster and another is a health issue, as explained in the resolution, the pandemic flu. Los Gatos has intimate history with earthquake damage, and we all know that it could happen again. And as stated in the resolution, should it happen again, it may well be more severe than Los Gatos experienced previously. And so, in keeping with the comments from the resolution, we're going to be doing three things. One, talking about it at council and sharing with the television audience those kinds of things that people can do to personally prepare, learn more, and take action to keep their families safe. Then we'll also be having two informational booths at the farmers market on the 8th and the 15th, both on Sunday. And then finally on the 17th of October, the anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, we're going to be having up to 25 neighborhood-based gatherings from 6 to 8 in the evening at locations that will be published on the website and also in the newspaper for people to come to their neighbors' homes and hear a presentation by trained members of the town's volunteer corps, the Community Emergency Response Team, on what the items that in a home preparation packet would look like, and how to create a family plan to reunite when people have been separated, and how to be mindful of work issues and school issues that could be associated with the pandemic. And so both tonight and in 2 weeks, we have two separate presentations planned for the public. Sergeant Kerry Harris is here and has both a visual presentation to be broadcast, but also a verbal presentation to make that will cover the high points. And we encourage people to look on the website to get more information and to contact us at the police department or through the website if they'd like to become involved and participate in the events on the 17th. And so with that, Madam Mayor, I'll turn it over to Sergeant Kerry Harris, who is our department's expert in emergency preparedness.
Thank you, Chief. Sergeant Harris.
Thank you.
In the interest of all of the efforts put forth in Los Gatos Prepared and in the emergency preparedness community here in Los Gatos, including our community emergency response team, we've worked long and hard to put together a program that hopefully will get people in our town prepared for a disaster. Tonight we're going to be talking about earthquake preparedness. In the next council meeting we'll be talking about the pandemic flu. So I have a PowerPoint, we'll take a few minutes and we'll forge on. As noted by the mayor, self-sufficiency is the key. The fact is that in most natural disasters, any significant natural disaster, government emergency services may or may not be able to help all the people as quickly as they need to. And so this program, Los Gatos Prepared, focuses on self-sufficiency. And so we are working to educate people and provide guidance so that businesses and residents here in Los Gatos can meet that level of self-sufficiency. Speaking about earthquake disasters, we're talking about a level of preparedness for a family for the first 72 hours. And to meet that goal, we are recommending that people create a 72-hour emergency preparedness kit. In this case, we're talking about food, that we believe that a good emergency preparedness kit will have canned food, or dehydrated food, or food, any sort of food that will be maintained without refrigeration, that is simple to use, that is ready to eat, that it will take a minimum of cooking and preparation, because in a disaster situation, utilities may or may not be present to allow for much preparation. We need to also recognize that people that have special dietary needs, that those food stores recognize that. And that also, because we're talking about canned food, that we want people to have a non-electric can opener. If we've been spoiled by having an electric can opener, that we can't assume that we will have electrical power to access canned food. The other certainly very critical factor in an emergency preparedness kit is to have water. The rule of thumb is 1 gallon of water per person per day. And since we're talking about 72 hours, that would be 3 gallons. 1 gallon per person per day for 3 days. We need to recognize that that water needs to be kept fresh, and so as we educate people about this, that we want people to rotate their water supplies, whether it's in 5-gallon jugs or 1-gallon jugs or one pint bottles, that those supplies are rotated, and so that it's fresh and available and healthful for people to use in the event of an emergency. The rule of thumb on that is rotating those supplies every 2 years. We also believe that a good emergency preparedness kit is going to have first aid supplies in the event of a serious situation, health care, emergency medicine. Services may be compromised, and people should be prepared to be able to help themselves as much as possible. And to that end, they should have a first aid kit and a good manual and how to use a first aid kit. Certainly having a supply of essential medications, prescription drugs, because pharmacy services may be become unavailable. And then certainly a supply of non-prescription medications, your aspirins, your Tylenols, and so on, because you may need that, and access to those things may be unavailable. In our emergency supply kit, we'll want to have good clothing, warm clothing, sturdy clothing, because the circumstances may be difficult. We recommend that people have a good pair of shoes, keep a good pair of shoes in the trunk of the car. Mayor McNutt relates a story when she was in Pascagoula that the town manager there had essentially no shoes to be able to access her destroyed city. And so in this case, keeping a good pair of shoes in their emergency supply kit and in their car so they can walk if they have to in case roadways are destroyed. And then certainly the idea that that supply kit should have clothing that's prepared for inclement weather. I remember back in 1989, October 89, after the Loma Prieta earthquake, we had rain very much like we had yesterday. And we weren't expecting it necessarily at that time of year, but it was there. And people that, if they were out in the elements, they would want to have protective equipment and clothing. Because homes may be damaged or destroyed, we should assume that that is always a possibility, and protection from the weather, protection from the elements is important. So your emergency preparedness kit should have a tent of sufficient size to house the people in your family, and then sleeping bags or blankets so they can be sheltered there. And then in the emergency preparedness kit, some very basic tools. And we all hear these things, we all know them, but we should have a flashlight with extra batteries, a battery-powered radio with extra batteries, and a gas meter shut-off wrench. And so that way, at night, obviously, we will have light with the flashlight. With the battery-powered radio, we'll be able to access emergency alert networks and find out what is going on and what is required of us. And then certainly the gas meter shut-off wrench, so in case the gas lines are broken to our homes or to our neighbors' homes, we can shut off the gas and hopefully thereby avert a disaster. In the kit, we would want to have documents. And probably the most important one would be our family communication plan. That is a very simple plan, but one that takes a little bit of thinking up front, that we would want to establish. Each family should establish an out-of-the-area contact person, the line of reasoning being that if we have a contact person that is in the area that may be compromised by the disaster, we won't be able to reach that person. So an out-of-state or out-of-area contact person. And that would be for all family members, that children, anyone in the family should know that number and understand how to use that process so that they can coordinate messages, because a family may be spread in any number of areas between work, school, and home, and coordinating where a family might meet up would be important. And then also to identify two neighbors and establish who they are and make them aware that they are part of the plan. Identify neighbors that could be used as a meeting place to coordinate, again, messages or potentially a place to meet. Cash and credit cards. In a serious disaster, the banks may be closed and cash may not be available, and so keeping a supply of cash on hand would be important. And then also copies of important family documents, because if a home is seriously destroyed, where family documents are not available, credit card numbers, copies of wills, copies of real estate information could be very important. As part of the preparation for a disaster, families should take a look around for hazards in their home. That would include any sort of heavy items, bookcases, furniture, wall hangings, anything that is heavy and could endanger the family by falling over. There's a wide variety of materials available for securing those items so they won't fall over in the event of an emergency, and then going ahead and strapping the hot water heater to the wall. It's very straightforward stuff, and the hardware stores in town have all the supplies that one might need to make sure that these things are not a hazard to us in our homes. As part of that plan, we should identify safe locations indoors and outdoors and discuss them. We should recognize that taking shelter under sturdy furniture in the event of an earthquake would be a wise place to be. If that's not possible, against an inside wall, away from any glass or other hazards, stay away from windows, stay away from things that might fall on you. And then when out in the open, recognize that power lines can fall, overpasses can fall, trees can fall, buildings can fall. In fact, several fatalities in recent years from earthquakes have been the result of people running outside and having facades or pieces of the roof fall onto the people and thereby injure them. So it's important to recognize if you are outside, look around your surroundings and make sure that you are safe from potentially falling objects. Then finally, taking the time to do some family education, that that everyone in the family has to know these things, that it isn't enough for me and my family to put together the kit and store it away where I know where it is and I know what's in it. Everyone in the family should know where the supplies are, where they're kept, what's there, because I may not be available to access that kit and to make my family safe. So as part of that is working through the 72-hour preparedness kit, make sure that everyone in the family knows where it is and what's in it. Work through that family communication plan, again, the contact information, out-of-area contact, and then actually walk through your home or places you might be and identify safe locations, talk about it, and then practice those earthquake drills with children. That's the best way to reinforce the message and to make sure that everyone in the family is safe. And the final message, and probably the most important message, is that we need to do it now. I go over this every time we talk about this, that I doubt there's many Californians that don't know generally that we need to have water, we need to have food, we need to have certain supplies on hand. And I'll confess, for a long time I was someone who knew all this, and I just plain never got around to doing it. And so the message is really about getting out and doing it now. And that's what Los Gatos Prepared is, providing the resources, providing the education, providing the checklists for people to go out. And we are going to be urging at each one of our meetings, urging people to go out, take those checklists, and make their families safe for themselves and for their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. Councilor, are there any questions of staff? Mr. Glickman?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for not only an excellent presentation, but an excellent program. And I heartily concur that we encourage our community to take some individual responsibility. Just as a technical question, as you talked about communication, having the numbers to call, if the power goes down in an earthquake, can we anticipate that cell phones will continue to work?
I'm afraid that actually cell phones will probably be the first to go. That generally in a disaster, and I used this example during our community emergency response team training, that during the Columbine situation, Columbine High School, that the cell phones went down within about the first 2 minutes, just from the very localized load on the system there, and we're down for about 14 hours afterwards. And so we should absolutely, when we talk about our communications plan, we should absolutely not rely on cell phones. In fact, and it's another part of what we teach in CERT, is about the idea of having a regular telephone, and in fact an old style telephone, not the remote ones, because the remote ones rely on 110 household current to power them. And so I would urge everyone to have an old style telephone that plugs right into the wall somewhere in their home, because that's probably going to be their best bet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from council? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I too also would like to commend you, Sergeant Harris, for the work you've done to coordinate the CERT team for our community. And I know that in this month of October, the intent is to really kind of heighten the awareness among all of our citizens regarding this service that their peers are providing, and also to recruit additional members to the organization. I think it's essential that all neighborhoods be represented within the CERT umbrella. Can you kind of give us an update on how we're doing in our neighborhoods, where the areas of strength are, where the areas of weakness are?
Absolutely. Currently, we have about 225. We graduated our 12th class of CERT members this last Saturday at Sunny Oaks Fire Station. They did an outstanding job. That was another 25 trained people here in Los Gatos and Montessorino. That brings us into the area of about 240 trained CERT members from all areas of Los Gatos, Montessorino, some areas that are unincorporated in some portions of San Jose. But we've got a good mix of trained people out there. We make it an option to those people that have been through the training, if they wish to participate, continue participating in the CERT program by developing teams within their neighborhoods to do so. And then our CERT staff works with them to help formulate those teams, develop standard operating procedures, and so they can respond to any disaster within their neighborhood, or if everything is fine in their neighborhood, respond to a disaster out of their neighborhood at the call of our emergency managers here with the town. Right now we have about 80 people that are actively involved in CERT teams in the neighborhoods. Those people meet every other month for update training in new areas, and going back over areas of training that they received in CERT. Many of those people attend certain CERT classes, medical or search and rescue, and the exercises. We have several, I believe it's 4 neighborhoods that are completely organized now, and we have, if I may, the town of Los Gatos has been divided into 21 neighborhood districts, and so our hope is ultimately to have 21 neighborhood CERT teams that are prepared and organized to respond. 4 is not as good as 21, but it's a lot better than 0. And so, and the sort of response and the sort of involvement we have in those neighborhoods has been outstanding. It's interesting to note that those people, those neighborhood teams, in addition to the resources that they bring from within their own team, they have gone out into the neighborhoods and looked for resources amongst their non-CERT trained neighbors. And we've found amazing things, that people are willing to give up RVs, people that have special language skills, people that have medical training or construction training. Those folks are identified within those neighborhoods and are ready to step up and help out if need be. So in addition to identifying people that have special needs in those neighborhoods, we're looking for people and have found people that have special resources that can be brought to bear. So it's been really a very, very much inspiring thing to see that the way that the neighborhoods have come together, and it's certainly our goal to have 21 well-organized and well-prepared neighborhoods ultimately.
Sergeant, just to clarify, though, on October 17th, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow, there will be 25 neighborhood get-togethers, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely right. 25, and we are working continually now to bring more neighborhood teams online. So, I mean, it'd be better if we had more. And some of those are, we have one that'll be set up at the Los Gatos Lodge, for instance. We have one will be set up on Almendra, so your classic neighborhood situation. We have a team that'll be doing a presentation at Los Gatos Meadows in the retirement facility there. So it's really it's a total mix of the kinds of services and the kind of communities we'll be working it for. But it's been very impressive the way that people have stepped up.
So residents can go to the website to get a list of locations?
That's right.
And if there's not one in their particular neighborhood, there's still time to organize something?
Absolutely.
Or they could just join in at a general location like Los Gatos Lodge, correct?
Yes, correct. As we identify CERT members, CERT teams that will be setting up display tables in the neighborhoods, that information we put on the website. They can certainly contact me, and I will facilitate getting them to a spot, because it is just so important to get that information out.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wasserman.
Yes, I'm sorry, what was that website again?
That would be www.losgatosprepared.org.
Thank you.
Is there anyone thank you very much. Is there anyone in the public who wanted to speak on this item? Yes, ma'am, would you like to come to the microphone?
Good evening, Mayor McNutt and council members. My name is Marilyn West. I live on Hollywood Avenue in Los Gatos, and I cannot tell you what a privilege it was to take this CERTS course that I just graduated from on Saturday. And I urge all of you others out there and in television land to do the same thing. I hate to tell you how old I am, but I just never did a lot of these things that I was able to do on this exercise. And thanks again to Bill Mercer and
Sergeant Harris.
Sergeant Harris. I thought maybe I'd call him a lieutenant and give him a little up. And Mr. Seaman, thank you very much for having this absolutely astounding program available to citizens. And I urge everybody to take it. And I'd like to see the school kids take this also. I think there's a great potential out there for these youngsters to get involved. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Thank you. Okay, and we're going to have another presentation on this program in 2 weeks, focusing at that time, I believe, on the pandemic flu and preparing for that. So thank you to staff for all of your hard work on this. Chief Seaman.
I would like to take the opportunity to introduce a new member of the departments and the town's emergency preparedness staff, and that's Mr. Jim Yoke, who's in the back in the white shirt. Jim works for Santa Clara County Fire Department, previously worked for San Diego School Districts, and was responsible for all of their emergency planning. And we're lucky to have him. We struck a deal with County Fire to share services both between Saratoga and Los Gatos. And so we get the benefit of his expertise and his planning to supplement Sergeant Harris's efforts, and he has been a big part of helping us plan both this event and all of our future emergency preparedness. So as you see him in town, it's a new resource we're very pleased to have, and encourage you to get to know him and understand his offerings to the town.
Thank you and welcome. Okay, let's move on in the agenda, if that's all right with everyone. And we are down to council matters. Mrs. Spector.
Thank you. A couple of meetings ago, I raised the issue of the council addressing or trying to address the environmental challenges that we are all facing. I also said at that time I was sensitive to the fact that staff and council had a large workload, and so I wanted to explore what would be realistic. And I have done that over the last several weeks. I have learned that the Silicon Valley Leadership Group is actually sponsoring an arm of that organization called Sustainable Silicon Valley, SSV. And SSV has done the heavy rowing for us. They have actually or heavy lifting is what I meant to say. They have actually come up with programs that can be done on the local level to help address our environmental challenges. And so what I am asking this evening is that, if I can get one person to support me, is that we simply agendize a report from SSV so that they can report to us what steps we can take on the local level. And we may do nothing at this point, we may pass a resolution, or we may become more proactive.
Oh, we have lots of hands waving down here to the right. Vice Mayor Pazinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to support that issue and have us do an overview of this. I like the idea that we can rely on outside resources to present this to us in its initial form, so we don't have to burden the staff with any development. And I think that it's definitely something that we should investigate as a community.
Mr. Wasserman, did you still want to speak?
I seconded it the first time, and I'll third it this time.
Okay. And I think it would be good to time it so that in case there is further discussion, that perhaps it would be a good item for council retreat in January, where we have a chance to discuss things in more depth. Yes, ma'am.
I was assuming that the timing of it would lie with the discretion of the mayor. And just when you do get around to it, I do have the contact people at SSV, and I do know the kinds of questions they will ask with regard to agendizing them.
Okay, great. We'll work on anyone else for council matters? Manager matters?
Not this evening, thank you.
We're adjourned.